Welcome to the Evolution and Future of Homeschooling Mini Masterclass, and I am Majesty AliNICOLE WOW, and I'm looking forward to bringing this mini masterclass training to you today. Make sure that you have note-taking materials because you certainly want to jot down some of the wisdom and insight that I'm going to be providing during this mini masterclass. This time will go by fast, but I don't want you to think that we're going to be rushing through this and you have to take massive notes, so to speak, because you'll have the opportunity to go back and listen to this mini masterclass as many times as you need to. But it is good to be taking notes, again, because there'll be wisdom and insight that will be shared, and you're certainly going to want to jot that down. Now, this is a very important topic, and for many of you who have been homeschooling for years, or some of you who are embarking on the homeschooling path, the reason why this is important is because there has been so much growth and evolution as it relates to homeschooling, and things are becoming more unstructured and uninstitutionalized as it pertains to the advancement and the expansion, which is all the evolution. And so it is important to know that things are starting to go through a metamorphosis, and I teach on this particular topic in many areas. The homeschooling agenda, if you will, has actually been undergoing a metamorphosis for quite some time. And what that entails is, if you liken it to a caterpillar transforming, or what I like to call evolving into a butterfly, because it becomes a completely different entity of expression. Metaphorically, this is what's been happening over the years with the homeschooling initiative too. It's going from a caterpillar stage to going through a chrysalis process of breaking down so that it now becomes a different expression in terms of how it will play out. So I'm going to be sharing about that, today. And again, it's important, no matter what level of homeschooling you find yourself at this point, you'll be served, because the information, I should say, I want to say, informing you about this and creating this expanded awareness is key, because you don't want to start your journey under the old model, nor continue your current agenda under the traditional formats either. So it is time to go through the evolution. So before I start really diving into talking more about this evolutionary expansion, I will share just a little bit about my background as it relates to homeschooling. And I've been homeschooling for well over a decade, and I'm also a certified homeschooling educator and online tutor consultant. I also do empire development for homeschooling mompreneurs, or homeschooling, parents. And I've been the creator of several homeschooling platforms, and they all come under my main umbrella brand, which is called Divine Paths Academics. And it really is for a new now era of homeschoolers, unschoolers, and also teen travelpreneurs. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how each of those fundamental categories too play an expansive part as it relates to this evolution that's underway. So I have various products and even publications as it relates to homeschooling. Again, my primary focus has been helping to develop homeschooling parents, homeschooling mompreneurs, and helping them to establish aligned entrepreneurial ventures so that they're able to have the balance with the homeschooling initiative and building home-based businesses as well. And so I also am the author of over 300 publications on Amazon, and one of my publications for homeschooling is called Homeschooling Mom Entrepreneurship Made Easy, and it's an intentional journal, a planner guide for designing and align homeschooling and home-based business agenda. And again, I'm going to actually get to talking about how the entrepreneurial aspect plays into the evolution of homeschooling. So it's exciting because, again, this is going to be the direction, believe it or not, that many are going to have to take. Over the next 5 years, you'll see that basically 85% of the education system is going to be in an online type of format or homeschooling type of format. And even those formats will continue to go through their own metamorphosis. Is our world is changing rapidly. And so we have to be mindful of what the newer progression is and what's expanding and evolving. And the educational frameworks that have been primarily confining to most, those are going to be breaking down. And you're going to find and see that people are going to be moving more into customized individuality types of learning. And that has to start with adults, believe it or not, but then the children and them having a solid foundation. Okay. So I do more expansive teachings, around this particular topic, but today this mini masterclass is primarily going to be informing you. It's going to be more informational, so to speak, but also giving you the opportunity to do some brainstorming around what could be possible for you in the now as this evolution is underway. So let me just jump right into talking about the evolution and the future of homeschooling. I've been sharing, bits and pieces just in terms of what the progression is of our world. And so as we move into this expansive era, I mentioned that most are going to find where they're going to have to do their own individualized types of learning, and it being in a very customized way. Now, this is very disruptive in a sense to the traditional educational system and even the traditional homeschooling systems that basically what was happening early on with homeschooling is that children were just being taught in a home environment, but basically still learning the same things that you would learn in traditional school. And having to keep a record, have set hours, and be able to report to someone as it relates to your homeschooling agenda, different states and laws, regulations, all of those played a huge part in the fundamental onset, I should say, of homeschooling, and carried on for years, and still that applies. But what you'll see in terms of the evolution expansion, all of that starts to break down as well, because again, it is getting children into their own individual customized learning templates. So it's not just about environments anymore in terms of having them withdrawn, so to speak, from the traditional school system and setting. It is a breaking down just of the educational system in general, again, so that each child can learn according to what is their unique design, what is their unique encoding. So within my structures around DPA, Divine Path Academics, it is very uninstitutionalized, and it is customized learning that is according to what the child's divine path will be, and at least what needs to be their jump start, so to speak. I teach also about rare genius kids, and actually my daughter is a rare genius child. And so that's a very different format of learning because it's not a linear type of learning experience. When a child is in the 3rd grade, they actually may be grasping college fundamentals. And when they actually are in maybe the 9th through 12th grade, maybe they're actually grounding some of the elementary principles. And I know that can seem very foreign because we need to build upon a foundation a certain way according to what the traditional school system has been. But that's really not how the education is shaping up. It's very unformed because it's a metamorphosis. and it is breaking down something that was, so it becomes something completely different. And this is happening primarily for those who are going through these experiences now, but the evolution in the future will be that that's going to be the normal path of learning, the normal path of learning. So some of you may be thinking, well, where do I fit into this at this point, right? Well, at this point, you are going to be in a metamorphosis with your child or children. And if you've been doing the traditional model, or even some of the homeschooling, unschooling, life schooling types of models, you're going to see that those two will take on a new formation. They're going to take on a new formation, but it's going to be more beneficial for not just your child, but for you as well, and also help your own evolution and progression in whatever you're doing. Now, most of you, if you aren't already a home-based entrepreneur or so, you're going to probably find that that's going to be the path that you're going to be taking, and also the structures in which your children will learn under those types of formats. Now, I'm saying the word structure, but actually it's a very unformed format, but there is structure within the unformedness. So going back to, metaphorically, the caterpillar evolving into a butterfly, that's a very unformed process. It's shedding old data, old information, so to speak, because it's reformatting into something completely different. But even that is a structured process, meaning because there is a progression that breakdown will come into a new formation. So there are principles and things in the human aspect, in which I actually have works around the human metamorphosis. There are customized learning fundamentals that come into play. And what happens is that it's not a cookie cutter template. So individuals will be going through this process and having a structure, so to speak, but it will be according to their unique DNA, their unique template. So it's not a cookie cutter system like traditional education, where you have to learn this way and at this stage and at this time. That's not how the evolution and future of homeschooling will be. And so with me bringing up the fact that more of the structures or formats, so to speak, will be more entrepreneurial, okay? And so kids will be learning in terms of multi-levels of career development, but it's not going to be primarily focused on them having a career, so to speak. It's going to be that they're learning kind of in those structures and those formats, where it's kind of the opposite, where in elementary and middle school and high school is kind of preparing you for that college experience. But again, within the uniqueness of this experience, it's actually reverse engineered in a sense. So there's a lot around this today. Again, I'm just sort of introducing you and just setting you up for what's emerging, just for what's emerging. All right. So let's talk a little bit about curriculums and the new formats of learning. So I mentioned that there's going to be a lot of customization for individuality, all right? And so again, it's not a set thing of the child has to have the same structures that a traditional school format would have, or even some online types of learning environments that still have these fundamentals or so, that's keeping the child confined to learning in that way. In this experience, it will be that whatever the child needs to be learning during that phase is going to be according to, again, that own child's evolution, what they're here to do and to bring forth, right? So I know some of you are probably thinking like, what in the world? How can you even put this into some type of format, for that to happen? And it's not necessarily the easiest thing to explain, because it still is very new and emerging, even though, I say that, but it actually really isn't new. It's just new, or newer, I should say, to the masses who are not really awakened and aware to this type of expansion and why it's necessary. So before going forward, I'm going to back up and talk a little bit about why this style of learning is going to be pivotal for, or vital, I should say, for the expansion of education and our future leaders, is because the world, as I mentioned, is changing. And there are unique encodings within each child of their own unique genius patterns that are going to be completely different. And if they are confined to these different structures of having to do things a certain way, it is actually limiting them from the greater expansion. So that type of path has to be navigated. Now, I say that it has to be navigated, and it does. It's not actually hard to do that once you do understand that this is the new way of learning and the new way of being, okay? And there are already individuals who have been doing this for years, but again, this hasn't been something that the masses have really taken a hold of, and they're going to be forced into this type of experience because, again, in order for the best innovation and the next best sets of leaders and society builders to come forth, it really has to be done based on unique individuality, all right? But being able to bring forth a collective embodiment of a new world, right? So again, it's going to look different, and the way you teach and your curriculums and all of that is going to be totally different. So you might find that someone who is in the 7th grade may be actually learning something on a 3rd grade level, and vice versa. Someone's in the 3rd grade may actually can pick up some fundamentals of a 9th grader, because the way that we're evolving is in a very non-linear format. Again, in a metamorphosis, things are unformed. They aren't meant to be what they were, but everything will frame up accordingly. So since I brought up frame up, and I do have a media background and also with film, and I know about nonlinear editing and linear editing. So when you think about how films are shot, right? They're not shot in a linear format all of the time. It's not, okay, here's a script and we're going to shoot this frame and then we're going to come back and shoot this particular one. And it's like A to Z. No, you could be shooting A, but you also could be shooting P after A. But when the frames line up, everything will flow the way it's supposed to be. And that is how it is even in the homeschooling, aspect, all right? Is, again, things are going to become unformed so that it can take on a new creation. That is the evolution. That is the future, because that is where this world is headed, all right? That's why you're seeing the breakdowns of so much in society, and even good structures that were in place to help get us to where we are. A lot of those structures are going to be breaking down as well. Again, not because they're bad, they are just not, I guess, suitable in a sense for what is emerging. A caterpillar life and a butterfly life are completely different. Completely different. And so whatever the caterpillar was doing to survive and to even thrive in that little, world, that was functional for that experience. But then to become more of what it's truly here for, that greater potential, then it had to go through the cocoon. It had to go through the chrysalis, so to speak, have the metamorphosis, have the breakdown, and then come into a completely new identity, a completely new expression. The way that kids are going to not just thrive, but be high-level contributors to a new society is that they have to have their own unique experience and learn in ways that are going to be the best for their development and ongoing progression. Okay. So again, each individual will be divinely guided in terms of what this looks like. Now, some may find that they're still in some semi-traditional structures, but again, what will happen is that will kind of reconfigure. It will reformat to sync up with this newer progression so that there is not the confinement to it has to be done this way. It has to be done this way. So I want to talk a little bit more about different learning formats. And so I was mentioning earlier in terms of, curriculums and not naming curriculums that you should be using, so to speak, but life itself is the curriculum. All right. Life is the curriculum. And then there's the guidance to what the learning process will be in terms of whether it is literal curriculum and certain books, certain projects that you leverage, for your child's learning. And you find that some kids actually learn more hands-on with doing projects and listening to different audios or watching different videos. Some are not going to be very textbooksy. Some are going to be more researchers. My daughter is an avid researcher, and so she does her own research too, according to her guidance. And as it relates to history and everything, she comes up with things that are just far beyond any of my learning capacity, from what I learned in the traditional system. So I learned from her and learned from being a part of that experience and seeing how, wow, that type of, if we want to call it unstructured learning in a sense, actually develops kids better, where they could be learning geography, but also as they're learning geography, they are developing great spelling skills and vocabulary, and even learning more about English grammar. So again, it's not a linear format. So you can put some kids in an English class, so to speak, and maybe they don't grasp those fundamentals in a traditional way. But if you actually allow them to study something else that maybe is not related, but they're actually learning that through there, it's a very nonlinear structure. And I've seen it work on so many different levels. And I wish that that could have been my learning experience, because I would have definitely been more evolved and actually grasped the fundamentals even better to build upon if I could have actually been learning from some things I enjoyed, or just in a very non-linear type of format. But again, so much over the years have been breaking down, and new emergences are coming. But we are reaching the point where the rules around how you're supposed to homeschool, all of that's going to be breaking down. It's going to be breaking down. And it is very much a divine thing, very much a divine thing, where you will be covered to educate your child accordingly to what's going to be unique for that child's learning. And that is, from K to 12. So before wrapping up here, I want to go back to talking more about the entrepreneurial frameworks and why those are the best types of frameworks to leverage in terms of homeschooling. Now, with home-based business, there is the ability, of course, or the flexibility to set your own hours for business and to be able to set up those structures. It's the same with the homeschooling agenda too, and where things are going as far as learning. So kids are going to be learning how to be really in the business of life, and how life and career is really one cohesive experience, but not having a work life that dominates, or even a school life that dominates from an individual being able to be in their own life and to live their own life. So much of the way we've been taught to live is you work a job, or you're in school for all these, many hours. There's really no real life being lived life is more like an extra curriculum, so to speak, than it is actually living. So life has been defined in terms of here's success. You get a job, and you, first of all, you get your education, and then you get a job. You spend a majority of your time educating yourself so that you can get a job, which it doesn't guarantee that you're going to actually get that job. So again, what's starting to happen is that unique soul purposes, and I know this can start getting into something and people are like, well, that seems a little far-fetched and woo-woo, but it's actually very practical. We are here for a reason. Each individual was born with a purpose, and that purpose can be ever-changing for sure, right? But instead of spending so much time learning things that that person's purpose is not really going to entail, that they need to learn according to what their soul's blueprint is. That is the divine blueprint, or if you want to call it what God's divine purpose is for a unique individual, because already knowing how that person's life will unfold based on their purpose, or what I teach, based on the encoding. So they live life and become educated from the encoding, which they end up learning far more than what they actually would in school. It's just that it's a very unstructured, and I keep using the word unstructured just because there's new formatting coming that's emerging, but it is just very customized, I should say. And so when going back to the entrepreneurship is when kids can learn how to be in the business of life itself, and then learn some of the business skills and principles around digital entrepreneurship, home-based business. It helps them to then set up a new life structure that's going to be customized according to them, all right? And again, the reason why children struggle with learning is because they're being forced to fit into a mode that may not be organically designed for them, aligned, I should say. But they'll end up getting everything that they're supposed to. So it's not like they aren't learning some of the basic fundamentals and things that are important. It is just in the way that they're learning it, okay? But at the same time, they also, some will be learning history that is actually not taught in the traditional format, but they're still learning history. And they're learning the evolution and the progression. So again, I have multiple trainings as it relates to this, and I do coaching and consulting too, for parents who are embarking on this particular initiative. So I'm not going to get into sharing too much more, around this. Today was just really to introduce where things are headed, and the evolution and the progression. The metamorphosis is still taking place, but you're going to see fundamentally that things are going to shift, and new normals are going to be set in, and allowing people to be all of who they've come to be. You will grow and evolve as you are embarking more on this homeschooling initiative. No matter how long you've been on this journey, things will be shifting for you, and you'll be learning new ways to be with your life as this is ensuing, okay? So there's information within the description and different products as it relates also to home-based entrepreneurship and homeschooling, and there'll be other resources in my contact, information. So I hope that this has been informative, just to heighten your awareness and expand your awareness so that you can start to grasp some now and next level comprehensions, and ultimately from this start to create your own new customized agenda. So before we actually close out, to just sort of shore up this masterclass, so to speak, where it's not just the information, I want to take a few moments for you to do some brainstorming, and I'm sure some of you have been, and ask a powerful question and answer that for yourself in terms of what is the evolution of my homeschooling agenda for this phase? Or you could start by asking, what is the metamorphosis of my homeschooling agenda for this phase? And what are my next best steps in embarking on this initiative? What are my next best steps in embarking on this particular initiative? And another question you can ask too, and these aren't linear in terms of how you ask them, I'm just being guided to share just a few, is I mentioned in terms of my umbrella Divine Path Academics. So you can ask, what is my child's Divine Path academics agenda for this phase? Oh, is there something I need to pause on, need to expand on? So you have to take time out to be present, to ask. God knows the future for sure, and there are different possibilities for the future, all right? Different educational trajectories, and you can actually plan out this way. I do a lot of work in this area where you can actually write 3 different timelines in terms of how this educational experience can play out. And you may find that from all 3, you're simultaneously operating from all of those. But there's not just it's got to be this one linear way. Again, there could be multiple ways in terms of how this plays out. And then you start to choose a more expanded path, the one that's calling you forth. So an example of this would be, let's say that you were looking for a home, or you wanted to build a home, and you had a designer, and the designer showed you multiple possibilities of how this experience could play out, right? So once you looked at your options, then whichever one calls to you the most is where you start to flow your attention. Now, within the educational experience, what will happen is that you can start off on one particular initiative, but then there could be the integration of other elements from the other trajectories that you have created, or all 3 trajectories may merge at some point. But just being able to look at your options. Again, all of this is the expansion and evolution of where things will be going. So I'm going to bring it to a close here. I hope that this has been beneficial for you. And I'm certainly excited for where your evolutionary journey is taking you and your child or children with the homeschooling initiative. Just make sure that you stay connected in terms of continuing asking, what is the evolution of this experience? And what's going to be best for my child, and also for your situation during that time. So reach out should you need some help and guidance and assistance, myself or others from my team. Be glad to support you at whatever levels and whatever ways that we can. So I'm wishing you the absolute best in this experience. Take care and stay blessed.